What's after? What's next? We're seeing a very
fuel prices are heavily subsidized. Areas it has become very, very violent.
Crashes in Iran are not What's after? What's next? We're seeing a very grassroots, leaderless, essentially organic movement on the ground, but also a lot of divisions and rifts within the Iranian society, many ethnic groups, many different areas and provinces. And so where would, even if a regime change does happen or a toppling of the entire system in the government, what's next? Who's going to come after? And this is by a generation who's seen the impacts of the 1979 A revolution, a sort of a destruction, chaotic moment after that, and what came after that revolution, what was thought by many revolutionaries, including many women, and what came after the revolution as far as what was promised and what was actually materialized. So this is another worry. And then they also look to their some of their neighbors. They look to Libya, they look to Syria, they look to Iraq, they look to Afghanistan, and that worries especially the middle class, urban middle class Iranians who want a better life, but they still don't want to sort of give their life or essentially lose it for that better future.
مردم با تیر زدن مردم با تیر زدن نه من دارم مردم با تیر میزنن.
Can you explain how these protests broke out and also how you're learning about what's happening with an almost complete internet shutdown?
Sudden increase in gas prices on Thursday night basically ignited the protests on Friday. We have to remember that fuel prices are heavily subsidized, have been heavily subsidized in Iran, and still with the almost 300% increase, it's much lower, relatively lower compared to world prices, and this has been an economic problem for the government, the high amount of money that they've been spending on subsidies, and the government has been struggling to somehow manage this, but it seems like they basically rolled it out or mismanaged it.
Protests continued in almost 100 cities and towns across Iran, and in some areas it has become very, very violent on both sides. There's been a lot of vandalism in different towns.
The U.S. government, basically by crippling sanctions, is partially responsible for the economic crisis that Iranian people are in. So even if they're not spinning the protests or the violence, they're part of the problem and not the solution.
We have seen reports of many hundreds more killed in and around Tehran. And as the truth is trickling out of Iran, it appears the regime could have murdered over 1,000 Iranian citizens since the protests began.
And no one's reported over 1,000 except for a few political groups outside the country. And for the State Department to come out with a number like that without any sourcing, without any backup from credible human rights organizations who are doing professional work documenting this, it hurts the credibility of the State Department, and it also is not a very beneficial thing in a situation. You don't need to hype what's going on because it's already pretty bad.
Why would they be wanting to hype it up so much if that's what they're actually doing?
Well, it's been the policy of the Trump administration since President Trump came into office to portray Iran as this super bad actor.
A Reuters special investigation has uncovered that the death toll from last month's protests in Iran is much, much higher than initial estimates from human rights groups and the US government. Reuters can now report that 1,500 people are thought to have died. Most organizations had previously put it in the hundreds. The number came to Reuters from sources inside Iran's government and close to the inner circle of the man at the top, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
When it comes to the death toll, this is just something that only Reuters has reported. There's no byline on the report as far as knowing who reported this. And the sources from inside the country are also unnamed, but it's mentioned that they're Iranian officials. I've seen reporters, I've seen analysts from the New York Times, from the Financial Times, really questioning how Reuters arrived at this specific number of 1,500.
جنازه‌هایی که تو هواپیما بوده یا خدا.
Yeah, the Iranian military is denying any notion of a missile bringing down this plane. As you said, it's too early to tell. But the fact that Iranian officials at this stage are refusing to release the black boxes, which are critical in trying to find out what happened minutes and seconds before this plane came down. What do you make of that? That doesn't feel quite normal to me.
Well, it could be, but it could also be that they want to review first. And I mean, there could be something nefarious about it or the exact opposite. We still don't know what the situation is with that. And also, let's remember that Iranian airlines in the country, this wasn't an Iranian airline, but because Iranian airlines do actually 2 years of sanction, have an aging fleet, plane crashes in Iran are not very much news. It's something that's a recurring problem, and people have heard this news in the past as well. So they might just be doing their own review of this. And then at the same time, we have to also realize that I don't see much benefit for Iran in this, to shooting down a passenger plane right up from their own capital. I think it's a very responsible statement. And then towards the end of the statement, first of all, it apologizes to the families for the human error. It asks for an investigation to find those responsible, to ensure, to prevent future errors. And then it asks IRGC officials, specifically says IRGC officials, to go on state TV, on national TV, and explain the details to the Iranian people. All of this was unprecedented. It was frankly unexpected. But I think it adds to this image of a more transparent and basically good governance after a week of this confusion and basically tragedy of a human error.
How would you say they are different compared to what we saw back then?
Definitely, these are very different. In 2009, it was a very political atmosphere. It shaped around the presidential election, which is the most important political event in Iran. There was clear leadership, political parties, established groups were involved. There was a direction, there was a plan. These protests don't really have leaders. They don't have a clear direction and plan. And a lot of times you just see people on their own on the streets, and that's how it leads to more radicalization, more radical slogans.